The world is an anvil, and the sun is the hammer. More than 3 million years ago, the savanna of the Great Rift Valley is a shimmering, heat-blasted expanse. For this clan of Australopithecus afarensis, our small-brained, upright walking kin, life is a relentless negotiation with thirst and exposure. They move through the tall, blond grasses like a river of brown bodies, their lives dictated by the search for roots, the location of waterholes, and the ever-present shadows of predators. Their society is a fragile bubble of cooperation in a vast and lethal landscape. This is the brutal reality of prehistoric life, a daily struggle written in the dust. But today, the hammer of the sun feels different. The heat is not clean and dry, but thick, wet, and suffocating. The air is unnaturally still. Not a single blade of grass stirs. The cicadas, usually a deafening chorus, have fallen silent. The animals are wrong. I heard of gazelle stands clustered together, not grazing, but staring at the horizon with wide, fearful eyes. Even the birds are gone from the sky. A primal fear, deeper than the fear of a leopard in the grass, begins to uncoil in the bellies of the clan. The world itself feels sick, holding its breath. An old female, her muzzle grey and her body a roadmap of scars, stops and tastes the air. She has seen more than 40 dry seasons. Her mind is a living library of this land's moods, a chronicle of its violences. The brutal lessons of paleontology are not learned from my scores, but from the memory of disaster. She remembers a storm from her youth. A storm that flattened acacia trees and turned the river into a brown torrent. The signs were similar, but this feels different, darker, heavier. She looks to the west. The horizon, usually a crisp line of blue, is a bruised, sickly purple, a color she has never seen before. It is not a storm front approaching. It is the entire sky changing its nature. This is the intelligence point for these human ancestors. It is not abstract thought, but a profound, instinctual synthesis of a lifetime of environmental data. She lets out a sharp, guttural cry, a sound of pure, urgent command that cuts through the oppressive silence. The others freeze, their foraging forgotten. They turn to her, their faces a mixture of confusion and dawning terror. They see the fear in her eyes, a fear that is not of a tangible threat, but of the world itself breaking its own rules. A hard choice is presented without a single word. They can ignore her, dismiss it as the rumbling of an old woman, or they can obey, abandoning their search for food and water to follow a fear they do not fully understand. Her authority, earned over decades of finding food and avoiding danger, homes. This is the essence of community, the outsourcing of survival to the wisest among them. As one, the clan turns their backs to the promise of food, and follows the old female as she leads them at a desperate, loping run towards the only feature in this flat expanse, the slight, shallow depression in the hard baked earth. The depression is a shallow scar on the land, barely deep enough to offer shade. It is not a refuge. It is a suggestion, but it is all they have. The old female does not need to give orders. Her foresight has brought them here. Their instinct does the rest. The moment they arrive, the clan becomes a single, frantic organism. They begin to dig. This is the dawn of engineering, born not of comfort, but of pure terror. The brutal work is the only response they can offer to the sky's impending rage, a significant moment in hominid history. Their tools are their bodies. They tear at the hard pack, sun-baked earth with their bare hands, fingernails splitting and bleeding in the first few minutes. The stronger males find sharp-edged rocks in the sun-bleached scapula of a long-dead antelope, using these fragments of the world to fracture the ground. This is the very definition of primitive technology, the desperate application of found objects to a monumental task. The pit becomes a hive of frantic, cooperative labor. The young ones, too small to dig effectively, scurry back and forth, dragging away the loosened dirt in cupped hands. No one works for themselves. The strongest males break the ground for the others. The mothers dig with one eye on their infants, who are huddled together in the center, their cries lost in the rising wind. This is an act of pure altruism, a collective sacrifice of the body for the survival of the group. As some dig, others are sent on a desperate mission. The old female points to the sparse, skeletal acacia trees on the horizon. They need a roof. The fastest runners of the clan sprint towards the trees. The wind, now a physical force, trying to push them back. They tear at the thorny branches, heedless of the fresh miners' ripping spines, and drag them back to the pit. They are building a fortress against a god. This is the first act of deliberate shelter construction in their lineage. A desperate attempt to impose a tiny bubble of order onto a world descending into chaos. They are not merely hiding from the storm, they are building an answer to it. The sky is now a rolling, bruised black. The light is fading into a terrifying twilight. Though it is still midday, the air, once heavy and still, is now a torrent of hot, violent gusts that steal their breath and sting their eyes with dust. The first raindrops fall, not as a shower, but as heavy, scattered splats that raise puffs of dust from the ground. It is the storm's final warning. The branches are laid across the deepening pit, a lattice of thorns and splintered wood. Over this, they hastily throw their few scavenged animal hides. They are digging a grave to stay alive, and the grave is barely ready. The old female lets out another sharp cry. Now, the clan scrambles, tumbles, and slides into the cramped, dark space, packing themselves together, flesh against flesh, as the world outside begins to scream. The world ends. The first gust of the true storm hits their makeshift roof not as wind, but as a solid, invisible fist. The branches groan, and dirt showers down on the packed bodies below. Then comes the sound. It is not a howl or a shriek, but a single, unbroken, deafening roar that consumes all other senses. Inside the pit, it is nearly pitch black. The cramped, subterranean night. The air is immediately thick with the smell of wet earth, terror, and the musky scent of their own huddled bodies. The ground beneath them begins to vibrate, a deep, resonant hum that travels from the tormented earth into their very bones. This is the emotional turning point, a descent into a sensory hell where the only anchor is the living flesh of the being pressed against you. The roof of branches and hides is a pathetic defense, but it is their only one. Rain begins to fall in a solid, liquid sheet, a deluge that finds every crack and gap. Cold water drips, then trickles, then pours in, turning the floor of the pit into a slurry of thick, cooled mud. An infant, terrified by the dark and the noise, begins to wail. But its cries are thin, really thin, almost swallowed by the storm's monolithic roar. Its mother pulls it closer, shielding its head. Her body a fragile, living shield. A young male feels a hand grip his arm in the suffocating darkness and grips it back. There are no individuals here anymore. They are a single, shivering organism, a knot of life buried in the earth, enduring a power that is actively trying to tear the world apart. This is the ultimate expression of community. Survival stripped down to the bare, essential truth of shared warmth and shared terror. The cataclysm reaches its peak. Lightning begins to strike, not as distant flickers, but as cataclysmic. Ground minus shaking explosions that turn the world outside white minus hot for a split second. Through the gaps in the roof, they see these flashes of annihilating light. They hear the sonic crack of ancient acacia trees being blasted into splinters nearby. Each strike is a physical blow, a concussive force that makes their teeth ache. They are huddled in the very heart of the sky's rage. Their survival a moment minus to minus no miracle. For hours they endure, losing all track of time. Their existence reduced to the vibration of the earth and the desperate, shared warmth of their bodies. Then, slowly, imperceptibly, the roar begins to lose its deepest note. The physical pressure on the shelter lessens. The roar becomes a shriek, then a howl, And finally, was spent. Riding mode. The rain softens to a drizzle. A grey, watery light begins to filter through the tattered hides. Cautiously, one of the males pushes a hide aside. They emerge, one by one, into a world that is utterly transformed. The sky is washed clean, a pale, innocent blue, but the land is broken, the grass is gone, scoured away down to the bare, wet earth. The horizon is empty. The trees that dotted it now just splintered stumps. They stand, caked in mud, shivering in the cold. Clean air, and look at the sodden, half-minus collapsed miracle they built. They have survived. This is adaptation in its purest form, not a slow change over millennia, but a rapid, intelligent response to immediate, overwhelming threat. This day will become a part of their story, a new layer in the deep foundation of their prehistory. This desperate act of creation against a backdrop of destruction is more than a story of survival. It is the genesis of architecture. The shelter, a simple depression covered in branches, represents one of the most fundamental shifts in human evolution, the decision to not merely find refuge, but to build it. This was an act of applied knowledge, a physical manifestation of the old female's wisdom. It was a declaration that these ancient humans, though small and powerless against the fury of the sky, possessed a tool the storm did not, a collective, forward-minded thinking mind. Every home we have ever built, every wall we have raised against the wind and rain, has its deepest foundations here, in this muddy pit on the African savanna. They learned that by working together, they could carve out a small pocket of safety in a hostile universe. We have inherited that skill, building cities of steel and glass. But the fundamental impulse remains unchanged. When the sky grows dark, we look to each other and we begin to build. Does the security of our modern walls make us forget that our strongest shelter has always been the trust we place in the person huddled beside us in the dark? The earth keeps its own violent counsel, and survival is the art of listening. But what happens when the storm is not in the sky, but in the mind?